Today is day 4 of the August 7-day retreat at Springwater. I will read some of the notes that I've made of questions and see whether a common thread emerges that we could pursue in today's talk. I seem to need something when my mind is running totally wild. Something to concentrate on, maybe, to calm it down. What do you say about that? Nothing new seems to be happening in my sitting of many years. It's always the same thing. At times, when I'm doing something without any purpose, without any goal in mind, there seems to be coming up a hint of the fear of death, fear of impermanency, the desire to accomplish something. I'm watching my thoughts and reactions, and I'm beginning to feel guilty about having all of these thoughts and reactions. I've done a lot of sitting, of spiritual training, at first trying to ignore my personality, then working with the personality, looking at it, exploring it, spiritual practice and therapy. Now I would like to go on to a level beyond this personality. I have almost only negative thoughts. And I have been doing some exercises in positive thinking. What do you think about positive thinking? What makes it nearly impossible to be with this moment for any length of time? What makes it so impossible to be with this moment for any length of time before a barrage of trivial thoughts floods the mind? First of all, in case I don't get to it later, I want to say that thoughts are neither bad nor good. They are to be seen for what they are, observed without judgment. Can one be intimate with this immense thought process that goes on in the human mind and connects with everything in the human body in forms of excitement, depression, energy, emotion, elation, depression, fear, wanting, contentment, or mostly discontentment. Discontent. Unless a human being is in intimate and seeing touch with this process of thought and body, thought including imagery, memory, verbal as well as non-verbal, that we include all of that in thought. That process which comes out of memory, stored in the brain from the past maybe this last instant, unless there is a seeing intimacy with this process, how it connects up with the physical organism, and how the physical organism connects up with thoughts. We don't know what we're doing. We do things blindly, albeit thinking that we're aware. How can one come into the feeling of urgency to understand about the operation of thinking as it connects with the body and as the body connects to thinking? The urgency to watch it, see it, glimpse it, come in touch with it, in contact with it, listen to it, become aware of it. Maybe in the beginning just in bits and pieces. One person, the very first meeting said, "What does this vast sky with the beautiful clouds and the woods and meadows have to do with my daily life, which is full of problems and sorrow and isolation?" Why do we feel problems? Why do we feel isolated and in sorrow? Divided from each other, in conflict, antagonism with each other. Does that have anything to do with this process of thought, which is not understood as it happens, not seen, palpably seen and felt as it functions in pleasure and fear and desire and discontent? And this whole process of me, which is thought in action, feelings in action, emotions in reaction, this whole process of me reveals itself, comes very much to the fore in quiet sitting. Unless one has already learned to suppress it through practices. Practices aimed at clearing the mind, creating silence, or creating a vacant mind. As to the question, what I think about a practice to quiet the mind down when it is running, totally wild, chaotically. My usual answer is, why not meet up with this chaos firsthand? Because this is how we live. With a mind that may be superficially organized during our daytime activities, even though chaos seems to break through. The moment the superficial order shows a crack, and chaos seeps through, chaos of thought and emotion takes over. Why not meet it? That's what we are, that's what goes on. Meet it without armament, without technique. Becoming acquainted with it. Patiently, is that possible? People say, I'm incapable of looking when this chaos is there, turmoil of fear, desire. There's no capacity to look. Does one tell oneself that? Because one has an expectation of what looking is like, and then concludes and says verbally, internally, I can't do it. That's part of that chaos. Thinking, I can't, I must have some way of approaching. Recently I read in a book by Vimala Thakur. Maybe I should find a place and read it so I say it accurately. But what is retained in memory is that she says, just as we exercise our bodies after years and years of neglect, almost total neglect of the body, exercising it intelligently, eating intelligently, an intelligent input of food as well as of other stimulation. So there is also a place for exercising the mind through some practices. And practices are experiencing or following the breathing or concentrating on. She doesn't list it at that point. But all of us have probably had or are engaged in exercises. And she says, there's nothing wrong, just as the body is exercised, to exercise the mind in some concentration. But not to assume that that has anything to do with a path toward enlightenment. That was rather an interesting way of looking at it, talking about it. When people ask me, what do you think, or do you think it's okay if I do this? Of course I never say, don't do it or do it. Who am I to say that? It's up to you, it's up to each one of us. So, to experience the breathing, there's nothing wrong with that. It becomes problematical when it's done with a vengeance. I've got to do this with compulsion, excluding everything else as undesirable distraction. then there's no awareness of what we're doing, that we're in the same pattern which we're in our everyday life, trying to achieve, trying to get someplace, with a measure of violence, and not aware of what we're doing. Because we suffer from that, we come to a place for retreat, and then we want to continue doing the same thing. Attain something, achieve something, work hard, fight, struggle against all of these intrusions from the outside, from the inside. Why not meet the whole thing? Just as in walking through the meadows or the forest, across the stream, meet the rocks, meet the water and the sound of it. Meet the feel and sound of the footsteps on the grass, on the twigs. Meet the fragrance of the wet earth and the dripping foliage. Meet a bouncing deer that doesn't want to be met. It's very rarely that one will come upon a deer and it doesn't instantly run away. And one person here who was at retreat told me how she met that deer. She did everything the deer did. The deer was licking its snout, so she was licking her mouth. The deer was looking, so she was looking. The deer was stomping with her foot, so she was stomping with her foot. She said, I've never been so close to a deer for such a long time. I've tried it, and it works. Sometimes. And then, as it bounds away, does one feel sorry that the experiment has so abruptly ended? Or does one watch the bounding, this unmatchable elegance and strength? So will one sit with chaos? Chaos in Greek mythology, and probably in other mythology too, was a personage, or some entity, a respected entity, from which we all sprang. With the disappearance of wilderness that we read about and mourn about, this wilderness of chaos is still with us. Within chaos of contentious desires and fears, all reflected now in thought, image, strips of videos, and all the orchestration, accompanying orchestration of the body, the sound of the whole cacophony. Why not begin to listen to that and not know where toward or whence from? And not exclude the cawing. That's what happens when one starts concentrating on the breathing. Then there are no crows or moving trees unless the mind opens up. And people tell me, you're wrong. It's not true that by concentrating on the breathing one will not hear the crows. I hear them. All right, that's good. I'm going to be taken up for having said that. That's good too. To watch whether in listening to the breathing there is this drive to get an A in it, to get better at it. We used to be told that if you can do it for, I don't know what the time was given, half a minute or half an hour or whatever time, then you're progressing. Then you can go on to another practice.
15 minutes.
15?
15.
50?
15.
15? What we're wondering about here is whether there is such a thing as progress at all, or whether this drive for progress and the movement in progression that we have been trained in, not just during this lifetime, but humankind has trained itself in this, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. The Eastern is very quickly catching up with it. Whether that in itself can come under investigation, under the magnifying glass of listening and looking. What is this desire to progress, to have a purpose, a goal? Not it's wrong, I shouldn't have it. Please, I don't say that. And if one hears it that way, question the listening. We can question that together when questions are brought up in meetings. But this whole idea of progression, can that come under investigation, be questioned thoroughly? Whether this is a product of our thinking. Probably had a beginning in time. Having just not too long ago read that there were primitive peoples who existed for some 30,000 years without much change, with quite a bit of stability, obviously. That idea probably was not rampant at the time, idea of progress, or else one wouldn't have existed stably for 30,000 years. The marvelous thing is in wondering as the idea comes up, have I progressed in my sitting? No, I have not progressed. It's still the same thing. The same thing meaning I want to progress. I don't like where I am. I have some image of where I should be by now, or could be. As this is being looked at gently, not with violence to get rid of it, examined, wondered about, spaciously. Space comes when we don't want an immediate result, when we just are curious about something, and slow about looking, questioning, listening. Then we may become aware of where we are. Projecting a thought and the whole body tuning into getting there. Or if the thought is you haven't gotten there in 5 or 10 or 16 years, then the feeling of frustration, unworthiness, inferiority, because other thoughts say other people have gotten there except me. To watch all of that scenario that is played in the mind, and take time and space for watching it, examining it. And out of this spaciousness of looking and listening, maybe the crow is heard for the first time. The touch of the cool air on the skin is felt for the first time. Or if one is sitting at the window or out on the lawn, dewdrops on a blade of grass. Has one ever seen it before? It's never as it is right now. It's a new discovery when it is seen now, spaciously, not thinking about making progress, but looking and listening out of no pressure to get someplace, but illuminating that pressure as it is conditioned and programmed into this body-mind for many, many, many centuries. And as we reinforce each other in this pressure, because we all carry it as a field around us, not just in the brain, we exude to each other the pressure to achieve, to excel, to be better. And, of course, the opposite reactions that go with every pressure. To fight it, to resist it. Pressure to do something else in its stead. The modern science that has recently sprung up of chaos, it has a name that I don't remember, is finding pattern in chaos, and there's amazement about that there's pattern in chaos, structure in it. One can find that in oneself. If one is not prejudiced from the start to sit with it and not know how to start or where to start, but just begin openly, patiently. You say, wait a minute, what if I'm not open, if that's part of the situation? Then I wonder whether one can sit openly with closedness. Meaning, openly just means no prejudice against it. To become aware that there's already a resistance against the felt closedness. And to feel that resistance for the first time. It's amazing when a subtle resistance, the gross resistance, is easier. But when a subtle resistance is felt for the first time, when it comes to light, it's amazing. In the midst of murkiness, the discovery and therefore the melting of resistance to this murkiness. It's already no longer murkiness when the resistance melts. The question comes up of one person saying, I have practiced spiritual meditation, trying to short circuit or shortcut the personality. Then I have been involved with personality in meditation and therapy. And now I want something beyond this personality. Be in touch with something beyond it. Where does this question come from? One can ask. Oneself or right now together. Because it is a common question, isn't it? Although one may feel I need to deal with my personality first. And yet, one can put that aside for the moment and wonder together where a question comes from that asks, I want to get beyond this personality. Is there something that can be touched beyond personality? Where does that question come from? What is its nature? The question we're asking about. Does it come from the discontent with all the facets of personality, fears and anxieties, depression, being sick and tired of it and wanting something different? Is that where it comes from? One has to look. Not just say, no, it doesn't come from there, or yes, it does. But take time and space to look. Feeling the pain of this caught upness in me, my fears, my needs, my frustrations, depressions, panic, anxiety, all of that, or my wanting to achieve, climb the ladder, tired of all of that, of the pain of it, suffering of it, and wanting something that is free of that, peaceful, and the imagination, painting a picture or an idea of a state of peace beyond all personality. And like with any idea projected and seeing oneself in that projected state, then the body responding with desire and energy to get there. Has one ever watched thoroughly, clearly, the whole movement of wanting, of desire, of craving, of will? It's all the same movement. Has one ever watched it very clearly as it unfolds in his mind and body? A state of boredom or discontent, unexamined, just annoying or burdensome, or lack of stimulation, disagreeable. And then the image of something pleasant, projected from past experiences with something pleasant, or from what one has read or imagined in the past, what others have told one. A person to be with, or a thing to be with, a place to be, beautiful country, a new house, or a state of peace eternal. And in imagination, seeing oneself with that person, with that thing, in that country, in that place, or in a state of peace, imagining oneself with the imagined thing, person, object, or state. And with that imagination, the body beginning instantly to churn with desire for it, which is circulation of the 30,000 chemicals, which revitalize the organs, the muscles, the glands, the skin. Can each one of us see that process of desire sometime or other when it unfolds? Maybe starting in the beginning, but maybe also from the beginning all the way through to the end. It's one of the patterns in chaos. Very prominent pattern in this, what we experience of chaotic inside. It's this process of desire, craving, wanting. And as many people who have been observing it testify, it's almost every moment. Almost no moment goes by without craving, wanting something. And let's look further. There's more to look, more to see. More to question. This process, starting up the way we've described it carefully, is away from what is, isn't it? Away in imagination into what thought creates as the future. Some other time, maybe next moment, maybe in a few years or tomorrow. And in that process of imagining the desired goal and going for it, the body is stimulated to go for it. There's no attention given to where it all springs out of. That feeling of discontent, boredom, lack of stimulation, unhappiness, pain. It's a way out of that, isn't it? A way away from that. Leaving that unexamined. Leaving unexamined what we just described, the present state of discontent, dis-ease, but also all the very minute happenings of this instant. The sounds and sights and smells of this instant, which are not imagination. They don't need to be imagined, they're there. But in a state of pain, discontent, or dis-ease, or boredom, the mind isn't open to listen and look. It's rather searching the files for something to think about that will give stimulation to this body, energize it again. It's like an addiction, like an addiction. With this tremendous concern and proper concern, it's properly executed, but we need to be concerned about this incredible addiction to drugs, smoke, alcohol. That is devastating large segments of our population worldwide. There's little or no attention given to the addiction to these movements of desire, which take the mind away from what is, which needs to be felt and seen to be healthy and in touch with ourselves and each other. In healthy, sane touch with ourselves and each other, and whatever remains on this earth of a natural environment. And if, after coming from so much stimulation from our daily life to a retreat, if the quite natural reaction of withdrawal sets in, the lack of stimulation, let's not run away from that, but feel it out. Be in touch with it, not call it names and know it all, and criticize retreating or the dumbness of just sitting all day long. One doesn't have to do that anyways. It's free to walk or lie down. But feel what withdrawal feels like. And I'm using a word. One can go easy on using that word. Just feel that state of blahness. And be aware what the mind does to help itself out of that. And watch it. And with wondering about it, watching it, one may find an energy coming up that has nothing to do with the stimulation of idea or desire, but just the energy of finding out something, being curious about what is going on in this human being, in this ailing human being, which represents all ailing human beings. The world over and throughout time. And one may discover deeper things underneath boredom, for instance. Like one person said, as I sit and or do something without purpose or goal in mind, with it, suddenly the sprouting up of a fear of dying, fear of impermanence. And I ought to achieve something in this life. Actually, this fear is reported by many people who come into a moment of no division, space, spaciousness, no feeling of separation, no thoughts bothering, and suddenly something is clearly felt, seen, touched, and the next moment of fear. What's going to happen to me? Or what has happened to me? And thought begins to spin. I will get hurt. Or I will disappear. I will lose my profession. I may lose my family. Thought is is ever there, ever present, to depict blissful and horrible specters of what's going to happen to us. And it does jump in at a moment like this. And if one is not in touch with that process, one is intimate with it, one has watched it carefully, time and time again, given attention to it, understands it, then one is immediately carried away into fear. And may fear continuing with this process of meditative inquiry. I laugh because people already identify me with meditative inquiry. It's just a name for something one can engage in. But the name is not the engagement. It's not an identity. It's something that one may come to a point of having no choice but doing, to find out what is going on in this ailing, aching, restless, fearing body and mind. One has tried everything, every escape. And one is still left with it. So, what is it? Maybe that question finally dawns upon one to inquire into it. Alone and together. We can always do it together because we're all in the same soup. We're all constructed out of the same principles on the subatomic, atomic, molecular, physiological, psychological level. All made up out of the same stuff. We've evolved together. The brain has evolved over thousands of years. So I have all the capacities that manifest differently in different one of us. All evolve from one pool of capacities and mutations here and there. So that's why it's possible to inquire together into a common problem. In a new way, not knowing the outcome, not trying to progress through it. We have tried progressing too long. Where have we gotten? To a magnificent technology which is about to wipe out both man, beast, and nature. But psychologically, we're still alienated from each other most of the time, not always. In feuds on the smallest level as well as on the global level. And so little in touch with love and compassion. So the question, which I think was one of the first ones, why is it so difficult to be here, attentive, aware, in this present moment, before a barrage of thoughts swamps the body-mind? We can give all kinds of reasons why, but it's a fact. So can one be with that this is what's going on, and not add to the barrage by one's criticism of it, judgment of it. One's escapes from it. Because miraculously enough, there is an awakening here and there from this barrage of thoughts. It does happen. Suddenly realizing that's what's going on. In the midst of the Niagara, waking up to that. And just the first thing is hearing the roar. All that goes on, physically, mentally. And the wind in the trees, which if one needs to hear it, one has to be quiet, doesn't one? So just a moment of coming to, a moment of wind in the trees, sounds of someone moving. Breathing. The plane in the distance. And thoughts coming up, maybe. I'm thinking again. The breeze is still going on. Just because thought has come up is not the end of the world. Judgment makes it so at times. But judgment too is not the end of the world. Can always be fresh listening and looking and touching. I'm mentioning all these senses because they can miraculously work as one perception, undivided, open, for a moment. Not to be greedy, to see the greed that comes up for more. One person said, I want more. And more and more. Or is that enough? Maybe for a moment as one sees the little pearls of dew on the grass, and then is that all? To hear that. And what it does to the body and the mind and to the pearls of dew on the grass, suddenly they blur. They're not there anymore. The internal video chamber is now in place. Videos and tapes, black and white and colored, sound and no sound, it's all there. Internally, from the past. And has nothing to do with the fresh sound of leaves fluttering. That for an instant of listening, it's not a video yet, it's not a tape yet. What is it? One can't say. Thought tries to make it into something so it can reflect it and look at it. But it's not necessary. We don't have to know. A tremendous discovery when that's made for the first time, that one doesn't have to know everything. It's all right just to be in touch and to be of it. without knowing what one is at this moment. This instant playback mechanism that's built into the brain to assure us we're still here, we're doing fine, or whatever. It operates, but it doesn't have to operate. And when that is realized, it may not operate for a while, because it's safe without it. It's safe not to know. And yet, when we need to know, if somebody yelled fire right now, we'd know how to get out of this building, I hope. Or when the bell rings, or however lunch is indicated, we know where to go. The practical survival knowledge operates without our intention. It operates. You don't have to worry about that. Actually, it operates very well, as people have testified time and time again in times of earthquakes. I was amazed what people told me in California this spring about how people were helping each other and jumping in, regardless of whether there was danger for them, just to pull someone out, black or white, old or young. It's precisely because there's no thought at a moment often of crisis that there's such clarity of seeing and action, which are not separate. Seeing and action are not two separate processes. They are one process. Oh my. It's gotten late. By the clock. We will end here for today.